I'm Miranda Chavez, 36, and I built a seven-figure hospitality brand from the ground up, no loans, no handouts. For years, I backed my younger sister through everything, her education, her breakups, her career, even co-signed a $1.5 million business loan. But when she sent a letter banning me from her wedding and told me to cut ties, I did, starting with the loan. Have you ever been pushed aside by someone you helped build from nothing? You're not alone. Before we dive in, drop where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to walk away just to protect your peace, hit like and subscribe, because what happened next? You won't see it coming. I'm Miranda Chavez. I'm 34. And for most of my adult life, I thought being the reliable one was something to be proud of. Maybe it still is. But if you're not careful, being reliable can slowly turn into being invisible. I didn't always feel this way. For a long time, I genuinely believed my sister and I were building something special. We weren't just sisters, we were partners. Co-founders. A team. When our parents died in a car accident 10 years ago, everything shifted. I was 24, she was 21, and whatever sibling dynamic we had before collapsed into something entirely new. Me, scrambling to figure out funeral logistics, bank accounts, power of attorney. Her, curled up in a corner of the living room, crying like she was 6 years old again. I don't blame her for that. We grieved in completely different ways. I stepped up. That's just who I've always been. She moved into my apartment for a while after the funeral. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she could figure things out. At the time, she was in her last year of undergrad, a photography major who hated deadlines and didn't own a calendar. Her student loans were a mess, and she didn't know how to navigate federal aid renewal, let alone consolidate the existing debt. So I did what I always do. I researched. I made calls. I figured it out. And when she didn't qualify for the refinancing terms she needed, I co-signed. That was the first financial tether. The first of many. We weren't best friends growing up, but we shared a bedroom and a bathroom for most of our childhood. Our fights were typical. Clothes borrowing, hair straighteners left on, birthday gifts that felt uneven. But after our parents died, something in me hardened into resolve. I was determined not to let our grief break what was left of our family. And at the time, she was all I had. The idea for the business started on a weekend trip. We'd driven up the coast to this tiny bed and breakfast that looked like it hadn't changed since the 90s, lace curtains, dusty floral wallpaper, breakfast served on mismatched china. But the bones were good. Gorgeous view. Solid location. A place with potential, if someone had vision. She did. She spent the whole ride home sketching mood boards and talking about color palettes. Imagine if this place had clean lines, raw linen, matte black fixtures. A modern retreat with just enough edge to feel curated but not cold. I didn't understand half of what she was saying, but I nodded. That was our rhythm. She imagined. I translated. It took a year to get the business off the ground. We didn't buy property, too risky, but we started small, managing short-term rentals in high-traffic areas. She staged the spaces, designed the branding, and built an Instagram presence that ballooned faster than either of us expected. I handled the rest: contracts, insurance, taxes, vendor relationships, customer support, and eventually, payroll. Every lease, every city permit, every single liability waiver, my name was on it. We officially launched Chavez and Company 2 years later. She insisted on the name. It sounds more elevated, she said. Less like sisters running an Airbnb hustle, more like a boutique lifestyle brand. I didn't care about the name. I cared about the numbers. The numbers were good. Within 3 years, we were managing over a dozen properties across 2 states. We hired a small team. She got written up in a travel magazine that called her the visionary behind the minimalist luxury boom. She started wearing wide-brimmed hats and calling herself a creative director. I started wearing blue light glasses and spending more time in QuickBooks than I'd like to admit. She got flown out to LA for a design panel once. Sent me a selfie from the green room with the caption, "They think I'm interesting, LOL." That made me laugh at the time. I didn't realize it was the beginning of the shift. The first time she forgot to loop me into a partnership call, I brushed it off. She said she assumed I wasn't interested because it was just branding stuff. Then it became a pattern. Meetings I wasn't on the calendar for. Invoices I had to chase her to approve. A publicist she hired without consulting me, someone who started referring to the business as her solo venture in early press drafts. When I brought it up, she said, "You're so much better at staying behind the scenes." I freeze in front of spreadsheets. You shine in the details. That was supposed to be a compliment. At our 5-year anniversary, she gave a toast at a team dinner. Talked about how she started the company with nothing but a dream and a sketchbook. I was sitting 6 feet away. I'd built the LLC, applied for our EIN, negotiated our first contracts. But she never said my name once. After the dinner, one of our junior associates asked if I was her assistant. I didn't correct her. I know how it sounds. Like I'm bitter or jealous. Maybe I was. But I wasn't looking for the spotlight. I didn't want applause. I just wanted credit. Recognition that the business she was standing on had 2 sets of hands building its foundation. Mine were just calloused in different ways. By year 6, the brand was synonymous with her aesthetic. She had a column in a home magazine and a curated line of interior goods. I still handled logistics, though now with a small operations team under me, and I still signed off on every financial decision over $10,000. But she stopped checking with me before pitching big collaborations. She'd call it keeping the momentum going. We started arguing more. Quietly, professionally. In conference rooms and Slack threads. She'd say things like, "You're being rigid," or "This isn't scalable," whenever I questioned a budget increase or pushed back on yet another expensive rebrand. I'd say things like, "You can't keep changing strategy mid-quarter," or "This isn't sustainable," and she'd roll her eyes like I just didn't get it. She stopped saying thank you. That was what stung the most. When the pandemic hit, we almost lost everything. Occupancy plummeted. Bookings dried up overnight. Our entire model had to pivot fast. I spent weeks on the phone with lenders, renegotiating terms. I applied for every grant, every loan, every tax deferment I could find. She didn't log into our business bank account once that month. When things stabilized, she wrote a long blog post about resilience and finding beauty in constraint. It went viral. Got reshared by a celebrity home influencer. She signed with a brand agent 2 weeks later. I didn't resent her for that. But I did notice that she never once mentioned how we actually kept the business afloat. No behind-the-scenes logistics. No spreadsheets or contracts or sleepless nights juggling cash flow. Just mood boards and musings about light. The final turning point was subtle. It always is. One of our clients, a big one, asked about me in a follow-up call. "Who's the other Chavez?" they said. "We never hear from her." My sister laughed. "Oh, she's more of an admin. She keeps the back-end humming." Admin. That word echoed for days. I didn't confront her right away. I told myself it didn't matter. The work was still getting done. The business was still running. But something in me cracked open that day. Not all at once. But just enough for the resentment to start breathing. She had become the face of the brand. The visionary. The success story. And I had become background. Reliable, invisible, replaceable. But what she didn't realize, what no one realized, was that I still held the keys. Every operating agreement. Every account login. Every single line of credit. And when she finally told me I wasn't welcome at her wedding, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just made a quiet decision. But that's later. We're not there yet. She met him at some rooftop event in LA, the kind of place with too many hanging Edison bulbs and not enough seating. I wasn't there. I only heard about it later, when she dropped his name casually during a Monday check-in. "Jared's got this amazing eye for brand identity," she said, scrolling on her phone while I walked her through the P&L. I didn't ask who Jared was. I thought it was a consultant or someone from an agency she'd worked with. I didn't find out until a week later that he wasn't in marketing at all. He was an ex-fitness influencer who'd pivoted to startup advisor. His portfolio, as far as I could tell, included a failed energy drink collab and a Shopify dropshipping course he no longer mentioned. But he had 80,000 Instagram followers and a talent for making everything sound like a TED Talk. That was apparently enough. She started bringing him to team meetings without warning. He'd sit at the end of the table, notepad unopened, legs spread wide, tossing out phrases like synergy pipelines and platform-first thinking, as if we hadn't been running a profitable business for years. The first time he suggested we reconsider org structure, I thought it was a joke. He wasn't on payroll. He wasn't even technically involved. But she nodded along like he was reading gospel. What would that even look like? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He leaned back and smiled. More agile leadership. Shorter feedback loops. Maybe separating vision from execution, just so we can scale smarter. Execution. That was code for me. She didn't defend me. Didn't clarify. Just tapped her pen on the table and said, "Let's explore that." I remember walking out of that meeting and sitting in my car for 10 minutes before driving home. Not angry. Not even hurt yet. Just stunned. Like watching someone slowly push the coffee mug you gave them off a table and then shrug when it shatters. Over the next few weeks, Jared became a fixture. He'd linger in our co-working space, giving unsolicited feedback to the design team. He suggested we replace our operations software with something sexier because he'd seen a founder post about it on Twitter. He talked a lot about vision elevation and personal branding alignment. I didn't know what half of it meant, and honestly, I don't think he did either. The team started deferring to him, or more accurately, to her through him. He spoke with a kind of confident vagueness that made people second-guess themselves. And she encouraged it. Called it fresh energy. Said he helped her think bigger. I tried to bring it up, just once. Over lunch, after reviewing our upcoming expansion numbers. You know Jared's not on the cap table, right? He's not an advisor, not an investor. He's not even listed on our NDA. She didn't look up from her salad. He's not part of the paperwork, Miranda. But he's part of the vision. And I trust him. That word again. Vision. I'm not saying you can't have people you trust around, I said. I'm just saying we should be careful about who has influence over the company. There's a structure for a reason. She speared a tomato, glanced at me, and said, "Not everything has to go through you." It wasn't the first time she'd been dismissive. But it was the first time I felt like I didn't belong. Things accelerated after that. He pushed for a full rebrand, new logo, new website, new tagline. The branding agency they hired sent over concept decks with names that dropped the "and co" entirely. Just her name. Stylized. All lowercase. Very chic. When I pointed out that our legal name and DBA were still under Chavez and Company, she waved me off. "That's just back-end stuff," she said. "This is about perception. Nobody cares what's on a tax document." I wanted to say. But I didn't. Instead, I asked her to walk me through the rationale. She took a deep breath, then smiled tightly. "You're not the face, Miranda. That's just how branding works." It wasn't said cruelly. Just casually. Like it was obvious. That night, I pulled up every contract with her name and mine on it. Double-checked our debt obligations. Looked over the $1.5 million line of credit we'd secured during our last round of expansion. Technically, both of us were on the agreement. But I'd been the one to negotiate the terms, put down the collateral, show up to the meetings with the bank. A few days later, she announced the rebrand publicly. An Instagram post with the new logo, a moody black and white photo of her in a linen blazer, captioned, "New season. New energy. Same vision evolved." I found out when a former client forwarded it to me with a question, "So are you stepping back from the company?" I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure how to answer. The wedding announcement came not long after. She sent out a digital invite, modern, minimal, no frills. Jared and her getting married in Big Sur. Dress code, elevated natural. Weekend itinerary included a sunset intention circle and a silent breakfast. I wasn't listed in the wedding party. That part didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was that I wasn't listed at all. No invitation. No call. Not even a group email. I brought it up at a budget review. We were looking at Q4 projections, and she kept checking her phone. "So, the wedding," I said, keeping my voice light. "Is there a date I should block off?" She didn't look up. "We're keeping it super small." "Sure," I said. "But I assume I'm at least," she cut me off. "I'm trying to keep the energy clean. It's not personal. The meeting ended early. A week later, I got a letter. Not an invitation, an actual letter. Typed. Formal. From her. It read like it had been reviewed by a lawyer. After much reflection, I've decided it's healthiest for us to take space moving forward. Please do not attempt to attend the wedding. I hope we can both move forward with clarity and peace. I sat with that for a while. Reread it twice. Then I texted her one word. Noted. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't call anyone to vent. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into our banking portal, and started removing my name from every personal guarantee I had ever put down. Quietly. Methodically. Precisely. It took less than 2 hours. 24 hours later, I had 72 missed calls. But that part comes later. The letter arrived on a Thursday. White envelope, no return address, typed label instead of handwriting. It was the kind of envelope you associate with medical bills or legal threats, thin, impersonal, official. I didn't open it right away. It sat on the kitchen counter for a few hours while I finished emails, made dinner, and tried to talk myself out of expecting anything from her anymore. When I finally opened it, I read it twice before I let the words sink in. Miranda, we're choosing to move forward with our lives in a way that honors peace and alignment. Please do not attend the wedding. We're grateful for what was, but it's time to let go of ties that no longer serve. No signature. No warmth. Not even a handwritten note in the margin. Just the paper equivalent of a door shutting. It shouldn't have surprised me, not after the last 6 months. But it still landed with a kind of numb finality. I set it down next to my coffee mug and stared at it like it might change if I gave it enough time. The next morning, I got the text. You're no longer welcome at the wedding. Let's cut ties. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't understand it, but because it confirmed something I'd been slowly realizing for months. I wasn't just being sidelined. I was being erased. I replied with one word. Noted. That was it. No paragraph, no punctuation. Just 7 letters and a silence that would end up costing her more than she understood in that moment. Then I turned off my phone. I made coffee. I washed the dishes. I sat at my laptop and logged into the business loan portal, the one we used for the hospitality brand's expansion phase. The $1.5 million line of credit was under our LLC, backed by joint collateral, but I was the primary guarantor. I'd put up most of the assets. My name was on every bank file, every renewal agreement, every signature page. She didn't even know the login password. Removing myself wasn't immediate. You can't just click a button and walk away from a legal obligation like that. But I'd been preparing for months. Quietly shifting the structure. Transferring ownership of subsidiary assets. Consolidating liabilities under the operating wing she now ran with Jared. I emailed the loan officer directly. Hi Marianne, as discussed earlier this quarter, I'd like to finalize the release of my personal guarantee on the Chavez line of credit. All required documentation has been submitted. Please confirm receipt and next steps. Regards, Miranda Chavez. There was nothing illegal about it. No breach. No drama. Just the slow execution of a contingency plan I'd been building ever since the rebrand. By that afternoon, it was done. I got the confirmation email at 4:36 p.m. Your name has been formally removed from the active credit agreement for Chavez and Company, now operating as Chavez Studio. Any future obligations will remain with the current managing members. I sat back in my chair. Exhaled. Not relief exactly, but a kind of stillness. Like realizing the rope you've been tugging on for years has finally slipped from your hands, and nothing fell. Then I turned my phone back on. 72 missed calls. It started with her. Then Jared. Then their lawyer. Then our business partner, Anthony. A few blocked numbers I assumed were the bank or vendors. One voicemail from Jared, furious and tight-lipped. Whatever you think this is, it's not professional. You need to call us back. Now. I didn't. Instead, I forwarded the confirmation email to Anthony and copied the legal team. As of today, I am no longer financially tied to Chavez Studio or its liabilities. Please direct all inquiries accordingly. Best, Miranda. It was short. Clean. Disengaged. I didn't owe them anything more. By the next morning, the calls had slowed. I got a flurry of texts, all different flavors of panic. We need to talk. What the hell, Miranda? This impacts everything. Do you understand that? You're sabotaging the business we built together. You can't just walk away. Please call me. Please. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went for a walk. No phone. No earbuds. Just me, a hoodie, and the sound of gravel under my shoes. I thought about the early days, our first clients, the night we signed our initial lease agreement, the way she used to thank me under her breath after every presentation. I thought about all the weekends I spent reviewing contracts while she hosted influencer retreats in Joshua Tree, the bank meetings she skipped, the midnight calls with vendors, the landlord disputes, the COVID pivots. None of it felt bitter now, just factual. Like reading minutes from a meeting that no longer applied to me. When I got home, there was a voicemail from Anthony. His voice sounded calmer, more measured. I just need to understand what happened. You've always been the one who kept this place running. If this is about the rebrand, or Jared, or whatever else, I get it. But this affects a lot of people. Just call me back if you're willing. If not, I'll figure it out. That was the only message I listened to all the way through. I didn't call him back. I knew what he didn't. The business had already started unraveling before I left. The rebrand had confused core clients. The new contracts were bloated. The influencer partnerships were expensive and unsustainable. They were riding momentum, not structure. The systems I'd built, underwriting processes, invoicing workflows, vendor protocols, those weren't flashy. But they were what kept the lights on. Without me, the foundation was gone. What they had now was aesthetics and enthusiasm. And a $1.5 million credit line they no longer had the collateral to cover. 2 days later, I got an email from a mutual contact at the bank. It was polite, but pointed. We've been made aware of recent changes to the loan agreement. Given the updated guarantor status, we'll be conducting a review of Chavez Studios' financials and collateral structure. Please expect outreach from our underwriting team. Translation: the loan was no longer secure. And they were about to feel the consequences of that. I didn't respond. I didn't forward the email. I didn't warn anyone. It wasn't revenge. It was release. Let the chips fall. Let the phone ring. Let her finally understand what it meant to build something you couldn't afford to lose. I sat on the balcony with a mug of coffee going cold in my hands, watching the morning roll in like nothing had happened. The sky was clear. A neighbor's wind chime clinked softly with the breeze. Cars passed below like they did every Saturday. And yet my phone, sitting face down on the little side table, vibrated every few seconds like it had something urgent to say. Eventually, I picked it up. Missed calls. 32 of them just from that morning. Voicemails. Texts. A few emails. My sister had sent 3 messages overnight, each shorter than the last. We need to talk. This isn't okay. You're ruining everything we built. There it was, that word again. We. I read it, then read it again. Let it sit. We didn't build this. I did. She decorated it. She curated it. She posed with it. But I was the one who made it stand up in the first place. I was the one who stayed up until 2 a.m. filing quarterly taxes. Who navigated city permit offices and zoning boards. Who negotiated contracts when our first vendor tried to back out of a renovation deadline. Who knew the difference between real revenue and Instagram hype. She never saw that part of it. Or she did, and just didn't think it mattered. Another message buzzed in. This one was from Jared. The voicemail started mid-breath, like he'd hit record before he was ready. Miranda. I'm going to be honest here, this is spiteful. You've put the entire operation in jeopardy for what? Ego? Pride? You don't burn down the house just because you weren't asked to sit at the table. That's not how adults operate. You want to feel seen? Fine. But this is nuclear. You've made your point. Now undo it. He hung up before the time limit. No, goodbye, no attempt at resolution. Just a threat in the shape of concern. I deleted the message. No response. There was nothing left to clarify. Around noon, I got a longer email from our former business partner, Anthony. His tone was careful. Lawyerly, almost. He explained that the bank had initiated a review. That without my guarantee, the terms of the loan were under threat. That they might need to freeze expansion efforts until new collateral could be secured. Then, at the end, a different note. I know this isn't how you wanted things to end. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. You did more than any of us gave you credit for. I should have said that sooner. It was the first honest thing I'd heard in days. I didn't write him back, but I appreciated it. By that evening, the panic messages had started to thin out. They weren't angry anymore, just pleading. My sister sent one more. Please, Miranda. Just talk to me. We can fix this. We can figure it out. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. That was the closest thing to an apology I got. But even that was conditional. It wasn't about what she did. It was about how it looked now that everything was unraveling. I put my phone on airplane mode. I poured another cup of coffee. And I sat with it all. The noise, the quiet, the history. The truth was, I didn't feel angry anymore. Not really. Anger requires energy, and I'd already given her everything I had. I wasn't even sad. Just done. Clear, in a way I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I let myself think about all of it without trying to rewrite it into something more palatable. I didn't make excuses for her. I didn't soften the edges. I just looked at it for what it was. Every birthday she forgot to acknowledge because she was too swamped. Every holiday dinner where I picked up the check because she'd left her wallet in her bag. Every late-night call I answered when her car broke down, or she missed a flight, or she needed someone to read over an email before she sent it. Every decision I let her make without pushback because I didn't want to be controlling. Every credit card I put in my name. Every risk I absorbed. Every time I minimized my own contribution so she could shine uninterrupted. It had always been like this. She floated. I held the string. And when I finally stopped holding it, she called it sabotage. I didn't reply to her texts. I didn't call her back. I didn't feel compelled to explain myself anymore. Later that night, I went through a folder I hadn't opened in months. Old receipts. Contracts. The original business plan I wrote on a Sunday night in my apartment, back when Chavez and Company was just an idea scribbled across 4 pages of bullet points and cost estimates. I remembered how excited she was when she saw the name. It sounds real, she said. Like we're actual business people. She meant it as a compliment. And back then, it felt like one. I still had the original pitch deck we used to land our first major client. My notes were all over it, margin scribbles, color-coded edits, financial assumptions highlighted in yellow. Her slides were beautiful. But the numbers that won us the deal? Those were mine. Somewhere along the way, the story had changed. I became behind the scenes. And then just behind. The wedding was still happening. I knew that. I wasn't checking, but people sent things anyway. Screenshots. Social posts. A photo of the invitation, all cream cardstock and gold leafing. Her name, stylized in all lowercase. His name beneath it, equally stylized. No mention of me. No reference to the business we built, the years we spent making something out of nothing. They were rebranding their life together the same way they rebranded the company, like I'd never been part of it. But here's the thing. You can erase names from letterhead. You can swap out co-founders on a press release. You can tell a new version of the story loud enough that people start to believe it. But if you pull out the scaffolding and the whole thing starts to shake, that tells you everything you need to know about who really held it up. That weekend, I drove out to the coast. No itinerary. Just a bag, a book, and silence. I stayed in a small rental with bad Wi-Fi and good light. I walked the trails. I watched the waves. I let myself breathe. Not rebuild. Not rebrand. Just be. I didn't know what was next yet. I hadn't figured out my own version of the story. But I knew it wouldn't include being in the background of someone else's narrative. Not again. She'd made her choice. And now, so had I. 3 days after I stepped away from the loan, the business credit line was formally frozen. I didn't hear about it from my sister or from Jared. I heard about it from one of our contractors, someone I'd worked with for years. He called me directly, confused and irritated. Miranda, we just got a notice from Chavez Studio saying payments might be delayed indefinitely due to temporary restructuring. That true. He didn't sound angry, just wary. Contractors don't like uncertainty. Neither do vendors. Within 48 hours, two major partners had paused current projects. One requested immediate payment before resuming work. Another pulled out completely. I didn't respond to the email thread. I wasn't on it. But I saw the subject lines in my inbox, threaded through old project chains I hadn't archived yet. Subject: urgent. Vendor response required. Subject: immediate funding hold. Subject: internal review. Board meeting? The cracks were starting to show. That's when I sent the email. To our legal team. Just one sentence. As of today, I am stepping away from Chavez Studio in full, effective immediately, pending terms of formal buyout. I didn't make a scene. I didn't announce it on social media. I didn't call a meeting or write a company-wide farewell message. I didn't want to be applauded for leaving gracefully. I just wanted to be gone. The legal team responded quickly, their reply full of neutral language and disclaimers. They requested a timeline, asked for final document access, reminded me that equity negotiations would need to follow standard dissolution protocol. I told them I wasn't in a rush. There's a kind of clarity that shows up when you finally detach from something you spent years trying to fix. It doesn't come with a speech. It just arrives. And you find yourself deleting files you once protected like they were sacred. That week, mutual friends started reaching out. People from our circle. Former interns. Stylists. Collaborators. A designer we'd hired 3 years ago texted, "I heard you're out." What happened? A consultant who used to grab lunch with us once a month messaged, "Are you okay?" Then, later that night, "Are you sure? You were half the company." The strangest messages came from people who thought they were being helpful. Family is family. Maybe don't burn it all down? She probably didn't mean it. It's not too late to make it right. I didn't reply to any of them. Because what none of them understood was that I hadn't burned anything. I had simply stopped holding it up. Letting go of a structure you built doesn't make you destructive. It just means you're no longer willing to be invisible inside it. And then, like clockwork, she texted. A long message, broken into 2 gray bubbles, delivered just after midnight. This doesn't have to be permanent. I know things got complicated. I know I didn't handle everything perfectly. But please just come to the wedding. Smile for the cameras. Say a few words if you want. Let's just get through it, and we'll fix it after. No apology. No responsibility. Just an offer to play the part one last time. For appearances. For branding. For the sake of something that looked whole from the outside. I read it once. Then I deleted it. There was nothing left to save. The next morning, I woke up to a new round of messages. The tone had shifted again, less frantic, more formal. Jared emailed. Legal CC'd. Subject: urgent. Transition planning. I skimmed it. He'd attached a proposed buyout outline. There were numbers in it, terms I recognized. He was trying to make it sound like a routine change, something amicable and professional. I didn't respond right away. I needed to be sure I was ready for what came next. I called my accountant. We ran the numbers. The valuation Jared had proposed undervalued the company by at least 30%. He'd used numbers from before the vendor pullout, before the loan freeze, before everything had started to fall apart. The image he was projecting on paper, in his voice, in that email, was of a stable, thriving brand. But I knew the truth. The operations model we built couldn't sustain itself on buzz alone. The back end was mine. The workflows, the client relationships, the vendor trust, it all came from systems I put in place. The moment I walked away, the scaffolding started to bend. That wasn't arrogance. That was fact. So I rewrote the terms. Clearly. Without venom. I laid out what the company was really worth post-disruption. I outlined what I was willing to accept. No extras. No clause. Just my share, clean and final. I sent it to the legal team and copied Jared. No subject line. No greeting. Just, "Please see attached." He replied 5 hours later. Subject: let's discuss. I didn't respond. I didn't need to anymore. My sister sent one more message that week. Just a photo of us, taken in year 2 of the business. We're standing in front of a property we just closed on. She's laughing. I'm holding the keys. I'd forgotten someone had captured that moment. Below the image, she wrote, I don't know when it got like this. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I stared at it for a while. There was a time I would have clung to that. Taken it as a signal. A way back. A reason to say, okay, let's talk. But I didn't want to talk. Some apologies come after the damage is done, not because someone wants to take responsibility, but because they want to erase the consequences. I couldn't give her that. So I didn't reply. Instead, I signed the buyout agreement. And I walked away. No speech. No press. No farewell post. Just silence. And space. The first sign that the story had shifted came from a phone call I wasn't expecting. It was from a woman named Dana, someone I'd met years ago at a boutique hotel conference. We'd shared a cab back to the airport and swapped cards, never expecting to speak again. She didn't ask how I was. She asked if the rumors were true. I heard you're no longer with Shava's studio. That you walked. Her tone wasn't curious. It was respectful. Careful. Like someone who already knew the answer and wanted to hear it confirmed. I stepped away, I said. Officially. A pause. Well, that explains why things feel different. It wasn't the only call like that. Over the next few weeks, I got a handful of quiet, respectful messages from people who'd worked with us over the years. A project manager at a hospitality group. A vendor liaison from a luxury property chain. A freelance architect we'd brought in during a Palm Springs remodel. They weren't looking for gossip. They were asking, gently, what came next. Whether I was consulting. Whether I was open to advisory work. Whether I was free. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I was the name behind the name. The & Co. no one bothered to remember. But now that I'd walked away, the absence was loud. Shava's studio tried to keep the momentum going. My sister made a public post, cleanly worded, pastel background, photo of her in soft lighting. Exciting changes ahead. As I evolve into a new chapter, I'll be leading Shava's studio with a renewed sense of clarity and vision. Grateful for all the lessons that brought me here. Let's grow. She didn't mention me by name, but I was tagged in a few comments. A handful of people asking if I was okay. One simply said, wait, did Miranda leave? The post tried to frame the separation as a glow-up. A rebirth. She did an interview with an interiors magazine where she talked about owning her narrative and stepping fully into creative leadership. Jared made an appearance in the background of a few photos, button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, giving the camera his practiced, casual authority. They made it sound like this was always the plan. But cracks started to show. The first property launch under the new structure was delayed twice. Contractors complained about slow payments. A key investor quietly backed out of the next round of funding. One of our longest-standing clients pivoted to a new firm. None of this was made public. No one wrote think pieces or exposed the internal chaos. But in the hospitality industry, especially at the boutique level, word travels. People noticed. Vendors whispered. And everyone knew someone who had worked with me. The version of events they were trying to spin didn't match what people were seeing on the ground. That's when the second shift happened. Not in the company. In me. I took a sabbatical. Not because I needed to recover, there was nothing broken, but because I wanted to reset without noise. I booked a small cabin in the Berkshires for a month. No meetings. No metrics. Just long walks and quiet dinners and sleep that didn't come with spreadsheets attached. I didn't post about it. I didn't bring a laptop. I read old books and cooked pasta at 2 a.m. just because I felt like it. There's a difference between resting and recovering. Recovering means you're healing something. Resting means you're not responsible for anything except your own breath. For the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone an answer. I came back a few weeks later and eased into consulting work. Quietly. By referral only. I picked my projects. Said no often. And when I did say yes, it was on my terms. I worked with founders who wanted to build something real, not something that just looked good on Instagram. One client asked if I could help with operational systems. I built out their entire backend in 3 weeks. Another needed guidance structuring vendor contracts. I introduced them to 3 contacts I trusted and stayed on to negotiate their first partnership deal. Each time, The work reminded me why I'd started in the first place. Not for the spotlight, not for a brand, but for the challenge of making something durable, something that lasts. In between projects, I traveled. Montreal, Lisbon, Oaxaca. Not as a retreat, but as a recalibration. I'd sit in corner cafes with a notebook, jotting down ideas I might never use. I didn't feel urgency. I didn't feel like I was behind. The pressure to prove myself had evaporated along with the need to be understood. And people noticed. One evening in Lisbon, I had dinner with a former collaborator, someone who had done branding for us in the early days. He raised a glass across the table and said, "You know, everyone's saying you handled it with class." I laughed. I didn't handle anything. I just left. Exactly, he said. That's what made it so clear. He wasn't wrong. The narrative my sister tried to push, that I'd stepped back for personal reasons, or because I couldn't keep up, fell flat because it didn't match the facts. The people who mattered knew who handled the operations. They knew who got things done. I didn't have to defend myself. My absence did that for me. Meanwhile, Chava's studio continued to wobble. They launched a line of home goods that got lukewarm reviews. The fulfillment was late. The return policy was unclear. Customer service was slow. Then a blog post surfaced from a former intern, a quiet but damning account of what it felt like to work there post-transition. Nothing scandalous. Just disorganized, chaotic, and, her words, top-heavy with aesthetics, light on direction. I didn't comment. I didn't share it. But people sent it to me anyway. Jared tried to do a damage control video on Instagram. It was 10 minutes long. Lots of buzzwords. Lots of talk about pivoting. He mentioned founder fatigue and early structural decisions that didn't scale. He never said my name. But when he talked about legacy baggage, I knew exactly what he meant. And I smiled. Because the longer they talked around the truth, the more obvious it became. I didn't burn anything. I didn't sabotage. I didn't play victim. I just stopped enabling a story that wasn't real anymore. And when I left, everything that was built on illusion started to shake. I wasn't proud of the fallout. I didn't root for failure. But I also didn't save them from it. That wasn't my role anymore. That was the real shift. Not the business. Not the industry perception. But me. I had finally stepped out of the role of fixer. Out of the background. Out of the story that required me to sacrifice myself so someone else could shine. And I didn't want to go back. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, one of those strange in-between days where the sky can't decide if it wants to rain or just look like it might. I just finished reviewing a proposal for a boutique resort in Vancouver when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Her. No subject line. Just a single message. I didn't understand what I was doing until it fell apart. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I read it once. Then again. Then I set the phone down without answering. Not out of spite. Not even hesitation. I just needed to check in with myself first. Because when someone's voice used to carry weight in your life, used to shape how you saw yourself, what you thought you were worth, you have to pause before letting it back in, even a little. Even just to listen. It took me 2 days to reply. "We can schedule a call. I'm available Friday after 4. She responded within minutes. "Thank you. We didn't do video." I'd made that clear. I didn't want to see her face or her apartment or whatever curated background she was sitting in. I just wanted her voice. That was enough. She was quiet at first. I could hear her fidgeting, pacing, maybe. Then a deep inhale. "I don't know where to start," she said. "You already did," I replied. "You reached out." Another pause. Then she went on. She told me things I already knew, but hadn't expected her to say out loud. That the business was struggling more than she'd let on. That Jared had stepped back after the bank meetings got complicated. That several clients had left quietly. That investors were asking pointed questions she didn't know how to answer. She said it without drama. Just exhaustion. "I thought I could figure it out," she said. "I thought I could just keep going. Post more, stay upbeat, make it all seem like it was still working. But the things you built, they don't rebuild themselves." There was a long silence after that. Then she said it. "I'm sorry, Miranda. I really am. I didn't see it clearly before. I didn't see you clearly." I didn't rush to respond. I let it sit. Because what she said next mattered more. I miss you, she said. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Not just for the business. I miss us. I miss having a sister. It hit differently than I thought it would. Not like a punch. More like a tide coming in, quiet, steady, undeniable. I'm glad you called, I said. She let out a small breath. Like she'd been bracing for something else. But, I added, I'm not stepping back into that role again. I didn't say it to punish her. I said it because it was true. I know, she said. I wouldn't ask you to. I didn't believe that fully. Not yet. But I appreciated the effort. We talked for maybe 20 minutes after that. She asked about my work, tentatively, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to care. I told her a little. She didn't press. She told me she was in therapy. That she was trying to untangle her patterns. That she saw, now, how much she'd leaned on me without ever realizing it was weight, not partnership. I believed her in pieces. That was the best I could do. When we hung up, she said, "Thank you for listening." I said, "Take care of yourself." That was it. We didn't text after. We didn't schedule another call. But about a week later, she sent a photo, an old one. Us as kids, sitting in front of our first apartment's broken radiator, sharing a bowl of popcorn. No caption. I didn't respond. But I saved it. Over the next few months, our contact stayed minimal. A holiday text. A check-in when one of our old mentors passed away. Nothing heavy. Nothing constant. Just civil. Distant. Neutral. Some people assumed we'd made up. That everything was fine again. But reconciliation isn't a handshake. It's not a scene. It's not even always a goal. Sometimes, it's just putting the pain down without picking the relationship back up. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a dramatic apology arc. I just wanted the truth to land where it needed to land. And it had. She saw the cost. She felt the loss. She said the words. But I didn't step back in. I didn't resume the role. I didn't build the bridge. I let the distance stay. Not out of anger, but out of respect for myself, for the years I'd spent holding something that wasn't holding me back. And that, in the end, was enough. 2 years passed. Quietly, steadily. No grand announcement. No viral comeback post. Just the kind of rebuilding that doesn't need an audience. I moved cities. Not far, but far enough that nothing reminded me of old meetings or vendor runs or the apartment where I used to pull all-nighters fixing someone else's mess. I leased a new office space, small, clean, mine. No framed photos of a co-founder. No extra desk for someone to drop in when they feel like it. Just my name on the lease and my name on the door. The new venture started like most good things do, quietly, with clarity. I focused on what I was best at: structure, systems, strategy. No branding fluff. No, we should do a photo shoot meetings. Just operations. The part everyone overlooks until it saves them. Within a year, I had 5 full-time staff. All women. All sharp. All capable. No one assumed I was the assistant. We built a consulting arm for boutique firms struggling to scale. A mentorship program for first-gen women founders navigating early growth. I started getting invited to speak, panels, podcasts, business schools. Not about revenge. Not about how to win. I talked about boundaries. About the cost of silence. About how family dynamics don't disappear just because you sign an operating agreement. After one panel, a woman pulled me aside and said, "You talk like someone who's been through something." I smiled. I talk like someone who doesn't need to explain it anymore. She got it. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. People in the industry knew enough. The version of the story that floated through circles wasn't dramatic. It was accurate. That the person who held up the back end had quietly stepped away. That things wobbled. That things stayed wobbled. Chavez Studios still exists. It's smaller now. They shut down the merchandise arm after 2 seasons. The influencer partnerships dried up. Some of the old properties are still under their name, but you can tell which ones haven't been maintained. The brand lost its shine, not catastrophically, just gradually. Like a light dimming, one bulb at a time. My sister runs it solo. I hear she hired a new operations lead. Good for her. We don't talk often. A holiday message here and there. An occasional forwarded article if one of our former clients makes the news. I never ignore her. But I never initiate either. We stay in orbit, but not in reach. I think she finally understands what I meant on that call. That forgiveness doesn't always look like return. That closure isn't always a scene. Sometimes it's just a long stretch of silence that feels clean. There are still moments, quiet ones, when I think about how close I came to spending the rest of my life in that old role. The silent one. The invisible one. The glue. But then I look at my calendar. My clients. My staff. I look at the office I built from scratch, the work that speaks in my voice, not someone else's caption. And I remember, I didn't leave because I broke. I left because I outgrew the story. It's strange, sometimes, to think it all turned on one word. Noted. 7 letters. No emotion. No spectacle. But that word was everything. It was the end of enabling. The end of making myself small so someone else could feel big. The end of holding up a house that wasn't mine to live in. I didn't scream. I didn't post receipts. I just stepped off the stage. And when I did, the show didn't go on the way they thought it would. Justice doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with peace. With quiet mornings. With full ownership. With your name, just your name, on the final line of a contract. I get asked sometimes, do you miss it? The old business. I don't. Not because it wasn't meaningful, but because it was never mine in the way people thought it was. I built it, yes, but I never claimed it. Not fully. I let someone else's vision sit in front while I ran the machine from behind. Now, the vision is mine. The credit is mine. The choices, the risks, the rewards, all mine. There's no one left to hide behind. And that, strangely, feels like the safest place I've ever stood. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say isn't a monologue. It isn't a confrontation. It isn't even, I forgive you. It's this, I see you. I understand what this is. Noted. Then you walk away. And you don't look back. So, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have walked away or try to fix it? Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone who just kept taking? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever been the silent backbone in someone else's success story, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about choosing peace over approval.